Emmanuel Macron caught France completely off guard last night when he announced parliamentary elections. The move on Sunday came after a disappointing showing for his party in EU elections. The risky bet could end up hurting the president. This after the far right's national rally emerged on top on Sunday.
French President Emmanuel Macron has asked the country to decide the fate of its future, calling a snap election immediately after his party's crushing defeat in the EU elections.
After having consulted Article 12 of our Constitution, I have decided to give you back the choice of our parliamentary future through the vote. I am therefore dissolving the National Assembly and will sign in a few moments a decree for legislative elections, which will be held on June the 30th for the first round and July the 7th for the second.
Projections indicated Macron's pro-European centrist party was to get just 15% of the vote at the European elections, less than half of the far-right National Rally Party with 31 to 32%. It was a poor result for Macron and his party, and one he said he could not resign himself to, suggesting he sees the rise of nationalism as a danger to Europe. Macron made the announcement shortly after Jordan Bardella, the triumphant president of the National Rally Party, called on him to take note of this new political situation. Marine Le Pen, the party's leader, then welcomed the legislative elections.
We are ready to exercise power if the French trust us in the upcoming legislative elections. We are ready to rebuild the country, ready to defend the interests of the French, ready to put an end to mass immigration, ready to make the purchasing power of the French a priority, ready to begin the reindustrialization of the country.
Now French voters have just weeks to decide. Do they want a future governed by the far right?
We can now bring in Andrew Smith, historian of modern France and director of liberal arts at Queen Mary University, London. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme today. If you're Emmanuel Macron at this hour, what are you thinking?
It's a challenge, isn't it? Clearly he has looked at the situation. Seen things are blocked. Currently, there was a hung parliament in the Assembly. There was no clear working majority. He has been effectively inviting his prime ministers to govern by Article 49.3, forcing through government business. We heard Yael Braun-Pivet, who's the president of the National Assembly, unable to build those kind of compromises across party. So, in some ways, clearly what Emmanuel Macron is thinking is that he wants to try and seize the initiative, that he wants to try and put himself back at the centre of this picture and to try and take control of that fractious assembly. However, it is an enormous gamble, and it's one which really invites the Rassemblement National to come out from the back benches where they've been making good headway, sort of playing wrecker in the assembly, but not really having to do too much while sort of outwardly seeming more respectable, to actually come out onto the pitch. He wants to make them articulate their position. He wants to challenge them on the electoral pitch, but it is a risky gambit, I think.
It's a risky gamble because clearly he's done this because he wants to catch the far right off guard. They only have less than 3 weeks now to mount a campaign for the French Parliament. It's a risky bet that could end up clipping his own wings.
Absolutely. People have talked about him trying to play Sorcerer's Apprentice, but it almost feels like he's really got this idea things have gone out of control. Things are slightly moving ahead of this. He wants clearly to take control of it, but it seems unclear whether he'll be able to. He's making a gamble, as we said, that the Rassemblement National won't be able to kind of marshal its forces and put together credible candidates across the pitch in time. He's making a gamble that the left will be unable to unite. Already we've seen an attempt to rebuild NUPES. Glucksmann and the Parti Socialiste did relatively well in the European elections. Of course, they came third in the overall vote share. But really, there's that that blockage in the road of Jean-Luc Mélenchon and the head of the France Insoumise, whether they can unite behind him. He's a very divisive figure.
Now let's just... Sorry, I just want to cut you off. I don't want to cut you off there, but for argument's sake, let's just say that the far right does pretty well, because as they took everyone by surprise, but they proved the polls right, essentially, last night. What if they do very well in once these elections are held for the National Assembly? Could we see a cohabitation?
Well, absolutely. Emmanuel Macron is pitching everything right now on the idea that in a second round runoff between a sort of small R Republican, a Democratic candidate from the majority, or Les Républicains, or even the Parti Socialiste, that if they run off in the second round against the Rassemblement National, the public will rally. There'll be a Republican front against them. However, that is not guaranteed, and it's a gamble that he's been playing for a long time while hollowing out the centre. We know already that Chirac tried this in 1997 and got, from a position of strength, we should add, and got cohabitation. And you're right, this could lead to cohabitation again. And what would it mean to France to see Prime Minister, probably Jordan Bardella in that instance, drawn from the ranks of the far right, stand there at the opening ceremony of the Olympics? This could be an absolute disaster for France. And so it is extraordinarily high-stakes gambling. It really does all come down to whether or not the majority, the Renaissance majority, can marshal its forces, can put good people on the ground and win those second round duels. Like I said, the unity of the left will be really important as well, but also look to the centre right, the Les Républicains party, and whether or not they'll cleave to the majority or they keep themselves separate and potentially strengthen the far right.
Andrew, you said that Emmanuel Macron, one of the reasons he may have done this is because, of course, to push legislation through. What happens if he winds up with a cohabitation? And will it be impossible, near impossible, to push legislation through when it comes to France's support for Ukraine, for instance? Because these two parties do not see eye to eye. We know where the far right stands when it comes to supporting Ukraine.
Absolutely. I mean, to put it mildly, yeah, of course, it will be extraordinarily difficult. And you think we have blockage and immobilism now in the Parliament? Just wait until this happens, if it does. This is really about a kind of fundamental moment. We know that the far right really cleaves to the Russian line in terms of support for Ukraine. But even look at the things right now that have been pushed in the ballot paper. Discussions about the right to die, the upcoming reforms or New Caledonia. All of that gets pushed away while this kind of electoral circus is actually running its course. I think this is a really dangerous time. We know that the far right has dangerous, damaging policies. We know that they've flip-flopped on things like Europe. And these are crucial moments where commitment to this idea of a common, strong Europe is absolutely fundamental. Of course, we remind ourselves that on Saturday we saw on the Normandy beaches a lot of people talking about how the idea of a strong Europe came together to defend democracy. That's the kind of spirit we need to see again. But the difficulty is that Macron's governance so far has made that more difficult than they've made it easier for people to rally towards them.
Andrew Smith, always a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you.